In this video, we're going to go ahead and use Google Sheets to compute a frequency and a relative frequency table for some categorical data. In this case, we flipped a coin. So we flipped the coin 8 times, and we repeated that 200 times. So each trial has 8 coin flips, and we can see the results here. So in trial 1, we flipped a head, then we flipped a tail, then we flipped another head, another tail, 2 heads in a row, a tail, and a heads, for a total of 5 heads. And we repeated this process 200 times and counted the results of of how many heads we got for each of these trials. I'm going to make a frequency table from that. So we'll go over here to our frequency table, and to find the frequency of each event, we're going to use what's known as the COUNTIF function. So we're going to go equal COUNTIF, open parentheses, and we're going to go ahead and put in, we need 2 inputs for this. We need to know where our data is, which in this case it's all in J column because that's the summary of how many heads we got. So I'm going to put J:J, and then we put a comma, and the second one is what are we looking for. And for this first one, we're going to go ahead and put 0 because we're looking for how many times we got 0 heads. Now if we want to do a word or a phrase, we do have to put this in quotations, but since this is a number, we can just go ahead and put in a 0 there. And then we're going to go ahead and close the parentheses and press enter. Now it went through, and again it's going to redo the trials every time we push enter and enter a new equation because of this the fact it's a random number generator. So it went through and found the amount of times we flipped 0 heads, which is this one. So on trial 24, we only flipped tails, and if we go through the rest of the data set, we'll see that there aren't any other 0 heads anywhere in any of the other trials. It was just the one. So we'll go back to our frequency table, and we're going to go ahead and find it for the rest of them. So I'm going to go equal COUNTIF and J:J, comma, but instead of writing 1, because I'm looking for the times we flipped 1 head, I'm going to go ahead and click on the cell L9. Now this will do the same thing as if I wrote 1. It's going to go ahead and look and see what values here in cell L9. Okay, 1, so we're going to go through column J, because we did J:J, and find the amount of times that we get a 1. So if we hit enter, we find that there's 7 times. Now the reason we want to add the cell instead of just writing the number, because if I go ahead and take this, click on the bottom right corner, and drag it all the way down to where the 8, it'll automatically update and grab the right cell. Because so as I drag it down, now instead of L9, it's looking in L12, which is 4. So it'll count the amount of times that I flipped 4 heads. And for this one, it's looking in the cell L14. So I'm looking for the amount of times I grabbed the number. I flipped 6 heads. And so it did that automatically. Now if I go ahead and do that for this one and grab it and drag it down, it gives me 0 because it's only looking for the zeros. So in every cell it's looking for 0 instead of what I want. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that. But before I do, we'll notice that 8 has the same amount. So it says it's the right number, but that's because we just happen to have the same amount of 0 heads as we did 8 heads. So we'll go ahead and undo that, and we'll get our data back to what it's supposed to be. So now to find the total of the data set, we can go equal SUM for sum, and go ahead and highlight all the cells that has our frequency, our individual frequencies, and this will go ahead and add them up, and we get there's 200 cells. Now we want to find the relative frequency. Now the relative frequency is the frequency divided by the total, so I'm going to go equal this cell, which is the frequency, divided by 200, because that's how many trials I did, and press enter. Now I could just go ahead and double click on this, and it will fill in my relative frequency chart the correct way, giving me my relative frequency of the chart. But if instead I wanted to grab the cell instead of write the number, I could go equal to this cell divided by that cell. It'll give me the same number. The problem is, if I were to click and drag it down, that's going to give me divide by 0, because then when I drag the cell down, it dragged this cell down too, but I don't want it to drag it down. So to get around that, I'm going to put $signs in front of my letter and my number, and that will tell Excel and Google Sheets to only grab that cell. So even if I were to go and drag it down, it's not dragging down that cell too. Because of the signs tell it to only look in that cell, don't look in any of the other ones. So even though this one, M14, the orange cell is being dragged down, the purple one is calling the same cell every time. And that's how you can construct a frequency and a relative frequency chart in Google Sheets using categorical data.